Hey, how you doing? Welcome to Wall Street Weatherman. I'm Greg, and today is our first show. So I'm excited that you're here, and I'm excited to start this journey. And as I said in my first video, to provide what I wish I had when I was working full time in the office, to come home and to get a summary of the markets, but also a feeling and a vibe for really what's going on, from the empirical and the quantitative to the qualitative, everything that's being mentioned, and all of the influences from countries to companies to just everything that's out there. And if you haven't seen the first video, please go watch it. But I've been doing this, for those who didn't watch that, I've been doing this for over 15 years. I'm super blessed that I've had a compound annual return of 24% during that time. And but I've been doing this really full time since I retired a little over 5 years ago. And I'm up at 5 in the morning, and I'm going until, into honestly into the evening. And the money is important. We all have to live. We all have to take care of our loved ones and our lives. But maybe I'm kind of a little bit of a geek, because I think that there's nothing more fascinating. I learn all about the world through the lens of business and the markets, and it's I don't know, I'm riveted. So I want to share that with you. And again, do something that I never got and always wish that I had. So with that in mind, we live in a legal world, so here goes the legal disclaimer that all content herein and views expressed are informational only and not advice to buy or sell any stock or equity. So there you go with that. And when I was thinking about the show, I was thinking about the format of the show. And I would really like to start off, at least, doing a show that's has very minimal editing and is just conversational and authentic and maybe a little bit raw, with flaws and everything, because I want to get down to business. I want you to get a good feel for who I am. And if that has some, it skips and, brain freezes at points in time, hey, that's life. That's the way it goes. And so that's the format. And then I was thinking, before jumping into the markets and what's going on this week, I thought about doing this show that I'm calling Know Your Money, Know Yourself. And as I said, my intro video, in school, at university, I was an economics major. I was also a liberal arts major. And um, Socrates, the great thinker, the great teacher, he said, "The unexamined life is not worth living," and sort of refine that down to know thyself. And that's really something that stuck with me, in the years following. And I think it's applicable to many parts of life, but especially important when it comes to investing. Um, by the way, I've got my computer over here with just some notes, and outline. And so if I'm looking over, that's what I'm doing, and maybe a graph or two, who knows? But know thyself. You know, I think that it's so incredibly important, again, from what I've learned and how I've refined my process. And that's all I can do, is share with you what's worked for me and what I've learned through time. And and the reason I think that's so important is that, sort of in juxtaposition, we've got, let's go back a little bit into the 1960s, into traditional finance, which was born out of the University of Chicago in the 60s. And traditional finance postulates that over time the market is a rational amalgamation of all the investors and all the opinions and buys and sells and emotions and personalities, and that when it comes to that that average, that it states that it sort of takes the emotion out of the equation, and um, and says that over time, then that being the case, that everything's already factored in. And it's one of the conclusions is that the individual investor therefore can't beat the average market return, which I don't- I disagree with. I mean, I've many people have done that over their careers if they're lucky, and if that's the case, then what are we doing here? You and me, and so I wanted to point that out because I subscribe and give far more weight to what the great economist and investor Benjamin Graham said, and going back in time, going back even further before the 60s. And Benjamin Graham was the mentor of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, who runs Berkshire Hathaway, um, and over the last 50 years is the most successful investor of our time. His mentor, Benjamin Graham, who wrote, by the way, The Individual Investor. If you haven't read that book, we'll talk about it, about how important it is to research and know the history of markets, in my opinion, that Ben Graham, instead of traditional finance and this rational sort of medium, he came up with the idea of the market being a person. He anthropomorphized the market and named him Mr. Market, and said that Mr. Market is a manic depressive, that one day he comes through the door and he is just doing great and super happy and positive, and everything is sunshine and roses, and then the next day it's the exact opposite. It is rain clouds, doom and gloom, and he is grumpy, and he would Mr. Market swings back and forth between these extremes and everything in between too. Sometimes he's just, blah, just sort of neutral, and I think that, to me, that's far more accurate in encompassing what goes into the market and what goes into investors and money managers' actions and thoughts and analysis and biases, which are huge. That's a big part of what I'm talking about now, is getting to know yourself, getting to know your strengths and your weaknesses and your biases, because so often I think that those can blind us. So, Ben Graham, The Intelligent Investor, go read that. Fantastic book. And, just on that note, Graham, Buffett, they helped to develop the value investing sort of school of thought, and we'll get into that in detail, but value investing is analyzing a company and its stock uh, with all the assets and liabilities and everything that goes into it. Um, the all of the assets, including the intellectual property and the brand, the value of the brand, and all of that, and looking at the company and its balance sheet, looking at its moat to competition, its competitive advantage, looking at its leadership, which is a huge part that I'll talk about in a little bit, and I'll just skip around my outline too, keep it organic. Um, but I'll talk about how important leadership is and how I didn't realize that or give it enough weight for a number of years. But the value investing, after you go deep into all of this analysis, pulling it back to your original investing hypothesis and saying, at this, with this analysis, I think that this is absolutely an undervalued asset. And then you invest in it. And by investing, I'll tell you what I've developed over time about how to leg into an investment, because the execution is so important as well. But anyhow, they came up with value investing and buying and holding, and the power of compounding money, which it was Albert Einstein, I do believe, that said that compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. Who knew? Who knew? He was such a scientist, and whatever. People can have lots of facets to them. So so that being said, I want you to know who I am as an investor. Like like Buffett, like Howard Marks from Oak Tree Capital, who's got some great sayings as well and quotes, and we'll talk about him. But I 100%, there's a saying on Wall Street: don't fight the tape. In other words, the tape over time goes up, the markets over time go up, and uh, so for me, overall, by and large, I want to be long and bullish. Uh, and so a part of my portfolio, a big part of my portfolio is about making those value investments and holding on over the long term, for and being bullish on the market and prices improving over time. That said, I also trade. And in that sense, I'm more running the strategy of a hedge fund where I'm long and short. But that's more short term, definitely in and out. And when I see dislocations that can last for, again, anywhere from a few hours to a few days or a few weeks, whatever it is, and keeping that in mind, that when I have a stock and I follow a stock, and you hopefully I get to know it really intimately, and sort of like Mr. Market, I start to know when it's had a good run, a nice appreciation, and maybe might be at a point of leveling off and consolidating, maybe even pulling back a little bit. At that point in time, I might take that long position and trim it a little bit, trim it, 10, 20%, and trade with that capital, with those dollars. And then when the time is right, reallocate that 10, 20% into that long, that stock that I'm long on. And then there's also, there's portfolio management, where if you have a stock that's grown over time, um, for example, for a little over 5 years, I've held NVIDIA. And again, done some trimming along the way. But if you have a stock that just performs well, it's prudent. To not let it become too big of a percentage of your portfolio, because then as that grows, then your risk grows as well. And those are all the the ins and outs of trading, and the methods that you can apply. I'll share with you the way that I do things, but that's another part of it too. You can trim when something does well enough that you want to bring it back from, let's say, a 10% position back down to 7 or 8%. Um, so, that being said, I'm going to stop this video here. Instead of continuing on, I'm going to just stop here and then pick it up in a second part. I think this is a good length for now. So hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Okay.